Welcome to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Doing business and life with a purpose, serving others and achieving success. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. We created this show for you because we want everyone to learn how to do business in life to make an impact in the world. Who will you serve today and what impact will you make? I'm excited to have this show. We just found out we're neighbors. We live close to each other, which is kind of cool when you do a podcast all over the world. When you got a neighbor in, it makes it even a little more closer. Jeff, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Steve. Thanks for having me on the show today.
You're very welcome. I appreciate your time. I want to jump in. We talked in the green room about iBridged. Why did you name your business iBridged?
The name iBridge is really about understanding what comes from this perspective of understanding your current state, understanding your desired state, and building the link and the pathway to getting there. I think of the Golden Gate Bridge often, and you'll see that in my logo as well. And the context for me there is, cold, deep water that you don't have to go through to get to your desired state. We've bridged together.
I like that. When it comes to challenges for business, iBridge and a bridge is so powerful because it can bridge to a solution. Talk more about that.
Yeah, oftentimes, especially at the chaotic pace that the world is in today, um, businesses and people in particular are really good at understanding that there's a problem. They're not always good at understanding exactly what the problem is or what the root problem is. They see the symptoms of the problem. And so that's a really good place to start, is to dig in on root cause. But once you've got some clarity around that, the real question is, how do we change it? How do we get to a place where, whatever that problem is and whatever the symptoms we're experiencing of that problem are, how do we get to a place where we're performing at a higher level? And that is exactly the focus of iBridge.
Yeah, that leads to growth and scalability and all that. What's
Mm.
interesting about a bridge, me and you can build a bridge. We still got to walk over the bridge. Is
Yeah.
that, one of the things that you help with taking action, how I look at that?
Yeah, that actually makes me think of the concept of, the impetus to change. And do you have it? And if you do have it, then we're gonna cover a lot of ground, and we're going to experience a much higher probability of getting to that desired state. But if the impetus for change is not there, to your point, actually doing the work and taking that walk across the bridge, then we literally have to reconfigure and focus on a different approach, because we've got to get to that place where you've got to want the change. And if you don't, there's not really a lot, anybody can do for you.
I would guess too, working with businesses and all businesses, the bridges are different sizes. You talked the Golden Gate, that would take us a while to cross, or maybe it's just a little walking bridge. It takes us 2 minutes to cross. Talk about those differences.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Some of the problems that we address, and some of the change that's desired, is relatively easy to get to, and some of it is more significant, all the way down to an individual level. Maybe an individual leader, all the way up to, changing an entire organizational culture. And I love the idea of a servant's heart, because in many ways, when we think about change, again, we can do that at an individual level and it's a relatively small bridge, or we can instill that culturally across the whole organization, which is a significantly larger bridge. But that's a great North Star or directional pivot point for most organizations.
And the faith is no matter the size of that bridge, if you walk it and work it and take action, you can still succeed. ROI is our big verbiage we use now, the ROI with the company, the growth or the scaling of the company, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to that. That's
Yeah,
exactly
no. Thank you. I'm learning from you already. This is great. So that leads to COVID. I think we're
right.
on the other side, but I don't want to discuss that. But that's a change, or I call a pivot, which we saw a lot of businesses fail. Talk about that. You had a company in COVID and they're
Mm.
trying to pivot. How would you handle that?
Yeah, this is such an important question, because for me, the phrase that's coming up is really about being proactive and getting ahead of it. So if you had your company set up in the right way, and I don't mean structurally or from an org design standpoint or understanding your customers, although those are all really good and important things to have. But if you had that servant perspective and you understood the resources that you're leading or managing in advance, COVID was an exercise in diagnosing the problem and being ready to address whatever comes. I think the companies that struggled the most in COVID were the ones that weren't prepared. They weren't proactive. They were maybe too focused on revenue or profitability and not focused on the people that were going to help them get there. So companies that struggled or failed were companies that were then, essentially behind the Powerball and the power curve,
Yeah.
and companies that survived or even thrived. And we did see that some organizations did really well going through this really awful time. Were ones that had done the work up front, who had built those bridges in advance and were ready to cross them when that problem came.
And what's crazy is, and talk about this, COVID was one of things that have happened. Recession, 2008 stuff. So many things happen. Do you help also and help guide a business owner like, hey, COVID's not the only thing. You're going to have something else come down the road, big or small. So this is an ongoing process, I would assume.
Yeah, and it is situational. It depends on the business
Hmm.
and where they are in the innovation curve, if that's their space, versus the execution curve, if that's their space. So understanding, what the business mission is always the right place to start. But I think digging in around this idea of what is your mission, what is your vision, and what is your goals, and then understanding everything that needs to sort of facilitate and then be the catalyst for moving that forward is one of the keys. And for iBridge, it's always focused on the people side of it.
Yeah. I love the people side. That's so important. I always hear Marcus Lemonis talking about people, process, and product. And
Yeah.
people are always the ones you familiar with the profit to show. Well, what's interesting, let's go backwards. Let's reverse this.
Okay.
Somebody's built a bridge and it's like you said, it's not a fit for them.
Hmm.
Maybe they need to shut down their bid or talk about that, how you handle that, where you see a bridge, you go, hey, that's not the right bridge.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. And I have a specific client example. The
Hmm.
names won't be shared to protect the innocent, but had a client engagement last year. The organization had a bunch of symptoms that were coming up. And so we went to that organization and we implemented a program that we call the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. It's a programmatic remedy, if you will, to helping organizations focus on building trust, having healthy conflict, having a commitment to common goals, learning and understanding how to operationalize accountability, and then ultimately focusing on results. And we've had tremendous success with that program in all kinds of companies, from startups to Fortune 500 organizations. And so we approached that engagement with a lot of confidence and enthusiasm that that was going to be the thing that helped them move forward. So back to your analogy about building a bridge that doesn't actually work. After we implemented it and we went back and we did some follow-ups, we found that it wasn't actually addressing the problems. And so the question was, well, why? First of all, that's always my favorite question, by the way. Why? Why isn't it working? Why isn't it having the same efficacy that we see in other organizations? And we sort of went back and started from square one again and started digging a little deeper into, what might be other causal types of problems. What we discovered was, back to your point earlier, the processes that they had in place to manage their business were either ineffective or they didn't exist. And historically they sort of got to that place because they had changes in leadership and there was this lack of focus or discipline around processes that had been put in place, and pretty soon it was a bit of a free for all. And so we overlaid this behavioral change model, the 5 behaviors, and it was ineffective because the supporting or underlying processes were just not in place. So we pivoted into solving that problem. And once we got the process piece aligned and removed some of the toxicity that was being generated on the team as a result of not having processes, there was a lot of, finger pointing going on. Once we solved that problem, then the whole bridge and the new bridge at that point, was really working and solving for them. They were seeing positive results. They were absolutely seeing, you know, I would say exponential movement towards their goal.
Breaking down a bridge doesn't sound easy. People can't do, or business owners, it's going to be tough for them to do this stuff on their own.
Also true. And, there was you're from the Bay Area. There was a consulting firm here that was pretty big back in the 80s called Ungerman Bass. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. I got a chance to listen to Ungerman speak one time. It was in a small business sort of networking environment. And one of the things he said, which has just stuck with me ever since then, is focus on your core and outsource everything. Focus on your core product and your core customers and outsource everything else. Be the expert in your space and bring in the experts that aren't in your space to help you run your business. So to your point, that was one of the inspirations for really focusing on, well, for creating iBridged in the first place is we're going to be an expert in this space so you don't have to. You can call us and we're going to get you to a place where you've got a change event happening and positive results and momentum happening way faster than you could do on your
own. That's the thing that, of course, we have to get past, that people think they know it all. And I love what you said earlier about this gentleman core, because my dad used to tell me all the time, don't recreate the wheel.
Yeah.
If you got a great marketing company, don't try to build it inside your company. I think the best companies are ones that do that partnerships, which is what we talk about a lot. Tell me, give me a description in what you think a servant business looks like.
Yeah, for me, and I've seen this quote now. I'm sort of forgetting who it's attributable to. It might be, well, I'm not going to guess at it, but the quote is, people talk about putting your customers first. This might be Branson actually with Virgin Air.
Mm-hmm.
People talk about putting your customers first. We put our employees first. And when we put our employees first, then our customers are served very well. And I really, really love that model because it's true. You can drive your employees to focus on their customers, but if you're not supporting them as well, the engagement you get with your customers is going to be something lower than what you actually want. A lower standard, a lower output, probably a lot of lost opportunities. And so for me, for businesses to really thrive from a servant standpoint, you must see your employees you must elevate them and serve them so that they can do their jobs or serve your customers. And so it's really a focus on the employee base to make sure that you're driving engagement, to making sure that they're feeling fulfilled in terms of the work that they're doing, but also rewarded and recognized for the good work.
You've opened up a can of worms for me, because I hear that phrase a lot and still do. Customers are always right. And that is so incorrect.
Yeah.
Because a bad customer can really affect your business,
That's
especially
exactly
a restaurant
right.
or retail, but any business. And I agree with customer service. That's what a servant does. So what you're telling me is a servant business also looks at it and goes, hey, I have some employees that are not serving our mission, our why, like you said. It's time to move on from them, correct?
Yeah, that's exactly right. We talk about this quite a lot, actually, that one bad employee can destroy a great team, and we want to help build the structures that identify those behaviors,
Yeah.
that align with that, but also build the discipline and to take action sooner rather than later. Because nothing will destroy a motivated employee faster than watching you not address a toxic employee.
Yeah, it's a one bad apple in the bushel that works every single time. want to talk about trust and accountability in your five behavior. I love that. That's habits. So you're helping people, including the owner, have better habits,
Yeah,
correct?
yeah. We start with an assessment, and we look at two things. We assess the actual behaviors, the ones that help build trust and accountability, and again, some of the other things that I mentioned, how to have healthy conflict, how to have commitment, to organizational goals versus individual goals. You want to find that balance there, and then how to focus on common results. So we start with an assessment. We assess the entire team, and we say, what is that current state? Where are we today? And we have a whole scoring mechanism around understanding where they're at, against those five behaviors. Then we go in and we do a workshop to really help them understand, how do we operationalize these behaviors? Looking at the data, where are our weak spots? What do we need to focus on to improve the behavior, leading to the improvement in performance, leading to the improvement in profitability? And so we do that workshop, and then we come back on a fairly regular interval to reassess. How are you doing? Are you making progress? Are you stagnant? Are you regressing, which sometimes happens? And what do we need to do? So think of this as a bridge that gets built, but is sort of consistently under construction to make it better. So continuous improvement is maybe a good frame.
Yeah.
And so we work not only with the business owner or the team leader, but we also work with the team itself. And ultimately, our goal is driving cohesion.
I like that. Because it gets back to people. That's you handle the people, the process, and the product. You can change a product or service. You could change a process system easily.
You can
Let's
you can
go
you
ahead.
can react to catastrophes like COVID. So your team is in a highly resilient state. So when all of that negative stimulus comes in, they're able to handle it, to adapt, to change, to pivot, significantly faster and easier than if those things aren't in place.
People are listening, maybe a founder, and they're like, "Great, Jeff, but I need profit. Get bills to pay, got a family to feed, all that." What is because profit first companies? I'm not a big fan of. Just I guess I just said it publicly, and it's wrong. But talk about that, the profit first company. How can they make sure they stay in the serving mentality?
Well, I think a profit first company has to get into the serving mentality.
Mm.
Yeah, because if profit is the number one, and there's a gradient here. If it's number one and number two is a distant second, they've got to get into understanding, where is that profit coming from? Maybe another way of saying that is, how does your organization from a people perspective enable, revenue acquisition and profitability from that perspective? If you're not thinking about those things, then it's sort of the antithesis of profit first, in that your profit is actually at risk because your business is at risk, your capabilities and your ability to go convert products to revenue and so forth. Um, it's compromised. And so it's kind of a high risk proposition. When you start to balance that, so let's say you can still be profit first, but you've got a pretty close second, which is focusing on your people and making sure that you are serving them so that they can serve your customers. That's a balance that we're looking for. So I'm not looking for organizations to reprioritize and take profit off the list or deprioritize profit. But I think there is a really important opportunity to say, well, who's making that happen for me, and how do I protect and grow them, maybe improve their capabilities of improving profit acquisition in the first place.
That's so well said. And I love that you said we're not de-emphasizing profit. Probably have to have. There's value to your product or service. You need to be paid for it, but you need to handle that profit. And serving is a mentality to do that. What does a servant leader look like in a business to you?
This is in some ways the core of what we do. we I mentioned earlier about the five behaviors assessment, and one of the assessments is, where are they on the behaviors? The second component of the assessment is a psychometric assessment.
Hmm.
If you haven't heard of them, psychometric assessment, sort of known commonly as a personality test, helps us understand some things about people. Honestly, every time I do an assessment with an individual or a group, I have a tremendous amount of insight for them. I understand what their communication style and preferences are. I understand what their tolerance for change is. I understand how they typically will show up in conflict in their healthy ways and in unhealthy ways. But more importantly, I understand what they need to be able to move forward. So think of it as a decoder ring on an
Mm.
individual level and on a team level to be able to say, from a leadership standpoint, what do I need to do? What do I need to change? How do I need to adapt to what you need? And fundamentally, it comes down to this perspective, just to make it easy to understand. We all know the golden rule, and a lot of people think the golden rule is the right place to be, which is treat others how you'd like to be treated. But the platinum rule is treat others how they want to be treated. And understanding how they want to be treated is the key. And it's not easy for a lot of people to sort of, understand what that looks like. The psychometric assessment encodes all of that and says, here's the coding for this individual and here's what they need. Let me give you a couple of examples. There are personality types out there that are very executionally focused. They're tactical. They're linear in the way that they think, and their approach is usually very process oriented. There's a sense of urgency for what's in front of them right now. When you talk to them, they talk about the what and how of work. Well, if you are that kind of leader, you're probably a little bit more inclined to do some micromanagement. You're very hands-on. You're very interested in sort of that visceral experience of, taking things step by step and making incremental progress. The other side of that dichotomy, which is the side that I live on, is much more bigger picture thinking, more future state. I don't want you to tell me how to do my job. I want you to tell me what you want done and then let me go, right? If you don't understand that about me and you come in and you start trying to micromanage me on a minimal level, we're going to have tension. And I'm going to look like I don't like it, I'm resisting it. And you're going to see that as I'm disengaged, I don't like what I'm doing, maybe I'm not the right guy for the job. When really it's just your approach to me from a leadership standpoint doesn't align with my need to how I like to work and how I'm successful ultimately. So a psychometric gives you an entire mapping of the individual. And then when we do it for teams, you can literally see what I call the fingerprint of that team to know exactly what they need, how to motivate them, how to communicate with them, how to lead them.
That's that's big. That's really big, and that's a great way to end the show on that, because that's going to get the listeners thinking. It's got me thinking, writing notes. I want to thank you for being on. This has been so enlightening and educational. It's exciting. I might want to start another business just because of what you're saying.
Let's go.
Let's
Let's
do
go.
it.
Yeah.
How can people get a hold of you, Jeff?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, LinkedIn/Jeff Harnois, iBridged, iBridged.com. That's the letter I, the word bridge, and then the letter D.com. You can reach me directly. My email is jeff@ibridged.com. Those are all good direct ways of contacting.
Well, you've been fantastic. Thank you for your time. And listeners, listen to this over. That's what I love about podcasts. You can listen to it over in bits and pieces and move to the parts you want to learn more about, especially your business owner. This might be a great podcast for you to listen to. And I hope to hear or see all of you at our next Doing Business with a Servant's Hearts podcast. Thank you all.